They fired the poor janitor. The next day, for black SUVs didn't arrive. Only the mop bucket, a silent sentinel, rolled across the polished marble lobby floor. It looked like it belonged more than the man pushing it. Elijah Vance kept his head down, a silent prayer against the towering indifference. His blue uniform, faded at the shoulders, his work shoes, worn thin, bore the silent testimony of years walking paths important people never noticed. Every morning, he arrived before the sun dared to rise. Every night, he stayed until the last echo of the elevator faded. Still, they acted as if he were a ghost. That morning, the air felt colder, not from the AC, but from the way eyes slid past him, like he was a smudge on their pristine world. He wiped phantom fingerprints from the reception desk while Lena, the young receptionist, giggled softly at her phone. She never looked up. Elijah finished, stepping back. A man in a tailored charcoal suit, Mr. Sterling, burst through the revolving doors, barking into a headset. "No, I don't care what the supplier said. Fix it today." He spun sharply, almost colliding with Elijah's cart. "Watch where you're going." Mr. Sterling snapped, though Elijah had been perfectly still. "My apologies, sir," Elijah said, his voice a low, steady current. He had learned that quiet dignity was his shield. Mr. Sterling stared, a flicker of surprise that a janitor dared to speak, then waved a dismissive hand. "Move." Elijah moved. He pushed his cart towards the service hallway when he heard heels clicking. Fast and sharp, behind him, Elijah. "Hey, Elijah." Lena finally looked up, not with kindness, but with an edge of impatience. He turned. "Yes?" She pointed to the lobby trash bin. "Near the security gates. There's a coffee spill, and someone left a pastry box. People are coming in. Don't make us look messy." "I'll get it," Elijah said. He walked back, knelt, and began meticulously wiping the sticky coffee from the marble. The scent was a bittersweet reminder of the world above him. He worked carefully, not for thanks, but because he respected the work itself. As he stood, the elevator doors parted. 3 executives emerged, a phalanx of power. One, a woman in a cream blazer, Ms. Albright, glanced at Elijah's hands, then the floor. "Is that wet?" she said, pulling her foot back. "I'm not stepping in that." "It's clean now, ma'am," Elijah said quickly. "I dried it." She frowned. "Next time, put a sign." "Honestly." Elijah nodded. "Yes, ma'am." The executives swept past, none offering a thank you, none meeting his gaze. He pushed his cart towards the back again, but 2 security guards, hulking shadows, blocked his path near the service door. "Hold up," one said. Elijah froze. "Is something wrong?" The guard consulted a clipboard. "They want you upstairs. HR." Elijah's throat tightened. HR. The words hung heavy, a death knell. The second guard crossed his arms. "Don't act surprised. Just go." Elijah swallowed, a dry, bitter taste, and nodded. He left his cart, hands still smelling of disinfectant, and walked towards the elevator. A silent march. Inside the polished steel mirror, he saw himself clearly for the first time that day. A man in his early 40s, clean-shaven, but with lines around his eyes that spoke of burdens never fully laid down. He looked like a man who had learned to make himself small. When the doors opened on the 8th floor, the carpet was thicker, the lights softer, the air heavy with expensive coffee and perfume. There was behind frosted glass. A young assistant looked up. "Elijah Vance." "Yes, go in." He stepped into a conference room. At the table sat Miss Thorne from HR, Mr. Caldwell, the building manager, and Mr. Sterling, the charcoal suit, now seated like a judge. Elijah's stomach dropped. Miss Thorne smiled, but her eyes were cold. "Elijah, have a seat." Elijah sat slowly, hands clasped in his lap. Mr. Caldwell cleared his throat. "We'll get right to it. There was an incident." Elijah blinked. "An incident?" Mr. Sterling leaned forward, a predator scenting weakness. "You were in my way this morning. You almost caused me to trip." Elijah's mouth opened, then closed. I wasn't moving, sir. But I apologize." Mr. Caldwell cut in. "We've had complaints." "Complaints?" Elijah repeated, his voice barely a whisper. Miss Thorne slid a folder across the table. as if it contained damning evidence. People say you linger, that you make them uncomfortable. Elijah stared at the folder, but didn't touch it. I clean, that's my job. Mr. Sterling scoffed. Your job is to stay out of sight. Elijah's face tightened, not with anger, but with a profound, aching pain. Mr. Caldwell leaned back. We're running a high-class building. Clients, investors. We can't have misunderstandings. Elijah looked from face to face. I've worked here 6 years, Miss Thorne nodded. A practiced sympathy that didn't reach her eyes. And we appreciate your service. Elijah's fingers curled slightly in his lap. If there's a problem, I can adjust. No, Mr. Caldwell said sharply. This isn't a discussion. We've decided to terminate your employment, effective immediately. The words hit like a physical blow. Terminate. Elijah felt his ears ring. Today, Miss Thorne's voice remained smooth. You'll receive 2 weeks' pay. Security will escort you to collect your things. Elijah's breathing hitched, shorter, controlled, fighting to hold himself together. Please, he said, his voice cracking, abruptly. I need this job. I have responsibilities. Mr. Sterling rolled his eyes. Everyone has responsibilities, Mr. Vance. That's not our problem. But as Elijah rose, a flicker ignited in his eyes, not despair, but a quiet, burning resolve. They had taken his job, but they could not take his dignity. This was not an end. This was a beginning. Elias looked down at the polished mahogany table, then met Mr. Sterling's cold gaze. What did I do that deserves this? Mr. Sterling offered a dismissive shrug. It's not personal, Elias, but it felt deeply personal. A wound to his very core, because Elias knew exactly what they meant. He wasn't one of them. He didn't belong in their gleaming, sterile world, except as a silent shadow, a ghost with a mop. Miss Thorne rose, a final, chilling gesture. You can sign the paperwork, Elias. Elias didn't move. His chest rose and fell, a slow, deliberate rhythm against the rising tide of injustice. Then a single, resolute nod. He signed. Security guards, built like stone, escorted him down the long, echoing hall, as if he were a threat, as if he might steal the very air. 6 years of quiet dedication, of unseen labor, rendered meaningless. When the elevator doors parted, revealing the bustling lobby, a sea of suits, elegant dresses, and polished shoes, Elias felt a profound disconnect. He clutched a small cardboard box, his spare gloves, a worn lunch container, and a framed photo, turned face down, shielding a cherished memory from their indifferent eyes. As he walked towards the grand, revolving entrance, Sarah, a young intern, finally noticed him. Wait, she called, confusion clouding her face. Are you leaving, Elias? Elias didn't answer immediately. His gaze drifted to the towering glass doors, the bright winter sunlight beckoning beyond. Then, his voice a soft murmur. They don't need me anymore. Sarah blinked, then offered an awkward, nervous laugh. Oh, well, I guess that happens. Elias nodded, a silent agreement that felt like a betrayal to the fracturing pieces within him. He stepped outside. The biting cold air hit his face, a stark contrast to the stifling warmth he'd just left. Cars whizzed by, people hurried past, their faces obscured by scarves and urgency, none sparing him a glance. He stood on the sidewalk, the cardboard box held tight, a fragile anchor in a world that suddenly felt vast and indifferent. And here's what I want to ask you. Watching this, have you ever seen someone pushed down, their dignity stripped away, and done nothing? Have you ever judged a person by their uniform, by their silence, by the way they were forced to stay small? Because the people inside that building, in their towering offices, had no idea the seismic shift they had just set in motion. Elias took one slow, deliberate breath. Then he pulled his phone from his pocket. He stared at the screen, his thumb hovering over a single contact. The name wasn't boss, it wasn't friend. It was simply, powerfully, family. He pressed call, the phone a cold weight against his ear. Elias's eyes remained calm, but a tremor ran through his hand, and somewhere, far away, something began to move, quietly, swiftly, towards that very building. Elias listened to the ringing. Then a voice, sharp with immediate worry, answered. Dad, what happened? Elias swallowed, the words catching in his throat. Before he could answer, a sleek, black car, impossibly smooth, turned the corner at the far end of the street. It moved with an almost predatory grace, as if it belonged to a different world entirely. Elias stared. His face remained impassive, but his eyes transformed. They held the look of a man who had been waiting a very long time for the truth to arrive. Elias didn't tell anyone in the lobby what he felt as he walked away. He just kept walking. The sidewalk was a river of hurried bodies, but he moved through it like water, slipping between rocks. People in expensive coats rushed past, clutching coffee cups, talking into phones, their worlds self-contained. A few brushed his shoulder, offering no apology. His cardboard box, light as it was, felt impossibly heavy in his arms. He reached the bus stop 2 blocks away and sank onto a cold metal bench. The call was still connected. "Dad," Kian's voice repeated, controlled, but the worry was a palpable current beneath the surface. Elias looked down at his hands. The skin around his nails was cracked and raw from years of harsh cleaning chemicals. "Kian," he said quietly, his voice raspy. "I'm okay. You don't sound okay," Kian shot back, his tone unwavering. "Where are you?" Elias hesitated. He always did this with them, his children. He measured his words, maintaining a protective distance, a wall he had built with love. "I'm outside," Elias said. "I'm heading home." A pause, heavy with unspoken questions. Then Kian spoke again, lower now, the question a precise strike. "Did they fire you?" Elias closed his eyes for a fleeting second. The question hurt, not because it was harsh, but because it was accurate. As if his son already knew the world's cruel calculus. "Yes," Elias admitted. "What did they say?" Kian pressed, and now his voice had an edge. Not the anger of a spoiled child, but the honed fury of someone trained to dismantle problems fast. Elias opened his eyes and watched a woman step onto a bus, laughing with a friend. Her world untouched. "It's fine," Elias said, the light tasting bitter. "They said there were complaints." "Complaints about what?" Kian pushed, relentless. Elias didn't answer right away. A bus hissed to a stop, its doors opening. People climbed aboard. Elias remained seated, rooted to the cold bench. Kian's voice softened, just a fraction. "Dad, did someone hurt you?" Elias's throat tightened. "No, no one hurt me." But he remembered the way security had flanked him, the manager's gaze that stripped him of worth, the gray-suited man's smirk. He forced a calm tone. "It's done. I'll find something else." Kian exhaled hard, a sound of pure frustration. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Don't act like this is normal," Kian said, his voice rising with conviction. "It's not normal for people to treat you like that." Elias's mouth pressed into a thin line. "It's not worth making trouble. You always say that." Kian replied, his voice laced with a lifetime of similar conversations. "You always," Elias cut him off gently. "Kian, please." The word please was not a request. It was a boundary, a plea for peace. Kian went quiet. Then, in a careful, measured voice, "Are you at the bus stop on Riverside?" Elias's eyes lifted, a flicker of surprise. "How do you know?" "I know," Kian said, sidestepping the explanation, his voice now firm, decisive. "Stay there. I'll call you back." "Kian, you don't need to." But the line clicked dead. Elias stared at the phone in his hand. He wanted to call back, to pull Kian back from the edge of whatever he was planning. He didn't. He put the phone in his pocket and watched the street. For a moment, he saw it again, the black car, far away, gliding through traffic as if it existed in a different dimension, untouched by the city's chaos. Then it disappeared behind a delivery truck. Elias told himself it was nothing. He stood up, the cardboard box still clutched tight, and finally boarded the next bus. But as the bus pulled away, Elias looked back at the Zenith Tower, its glass facade reflecting the setting sun like a cold, unblinking eye. And for the first time, a spark ignited in his own eyes, not of defeat, but of a quiet, unyielding resolve. The fight, he realized, had just begun. Home wasn't a postcard dream with a picket fence. It was the third-floor walk-up in Liberty Heights, a testament to resilience etched in every brick. The sidewalks were cracked, The streetlights flickered like tired eyes, and the stairwell hummed with the scent of generations, fried food, old paint, and enduring spirit. Walls bore the scars of time, taped up notices faded and ignored. Elijah Vance ascended, each step a quiet battle against the ache in his knees. The apartment, when he opened the door, was a sanctuary of quiet order, not luxurious, but meticulously kept. Not because Elijah had time for deep cleaning, but because chaos felt like life slipping through his fingers. A small dining table by the window, two mismatched chairs, a cheap kettle on the counter, a stack of bills neatly aligned under a smooth river stone. He set the heavy box down, then stood, breathing slowly, a man trying to convince his body not to surrender to the panic clawing at his throat. He walked to the sink, turned on the water, and washed his hands for a long time, longer than necessary, as if he could scrub away the invisible grime of being cast out, of being deemed unworthy. In the bedroom, Enya's uniform was draped over a chair. She wasn't home yet. Anya worked evenings at the community care center, serving those forgotten by the system. She rarely complained, returning tired, hair pulled back, hands smelling of antiseptic and hope. Elijah often thought she deserved a kingdom, but Anya never asked for a kingdom. She only asked for peace. Elijah checked the time, then opened the fridge. Rice, kimchi, eggs, and leftover soup. He heated it slowly, watching the steam rise, a small cloud of warmth in the cold reality. He felt no hunger, yet he ate. That was Elijah Vance's life. He did what had to be done, even when his spirit felt hollow. After eating, he sat at the table and faced the stack: rent, electricity, Enya's bus pass, his own phone, a medical bill from last month when Maya had a fever. They hadn't dared to wait. Elijah did the numbers in his head. His paycheck was gone. 2 weeks' pay wasn't a solution. It was a delay, a cruel joke. He rubbed his forehead, staring out the window. Kids ran past, kicking a can. A man argued on the corner. A dog barked. The normal symphony of Liberty Heights played on, but Elijah felt his world had fractured. He reached for the worn photograph from his box. It was a family portrait: Elijah, Anya, Marcus, and Maya by a shimmering lake, bundled in jackets. A simple picture, yet Elijah remembered that day with aching clarity. It had been peaceful. It had been one of the few days he allowed himself to feel like a father, not just a provider. In the photo, Marcus stood tall, even then, straight posture, calm eyes that seemed to absorb everything. Maya stood closer to Anya, a softer smile, but her gaze was sharp too, seeing more than people realized. Elijah turned the frame over, setting it down gently. He didn't like looking at it too long. It felt like holding something infinitely precious in a room that suddenly felt too small, too fragile. The door opened at 7:40 p.m. Anya stepped in, cheeks flushed from the biting cold. She kicked off her shoes, a sigh escaping her lips. "I'm exhausted." Elijah stood. "I warmed soup." Enya's eyes softened. "Thank you." Then she noticed the box on the table. Her face changed, a flicker of apprehension. "What's that?" Elijah didn't sit. He remained standing, a man awaiting judgment. "They let me go today." Anya froze. A silent scream caught in her throat. Then she whispered, "What?" Elijah nodded once. "They said there were complaints." Anya walked closer, slowly, her gaze unwavering. "Complaints about you?" Elijah shrugged, a small, almost imperceptible movement that carried the weight of years of swallowed anger, of indignity. "It doesn't matter." "It matters," Anya said, her voice firmer now. She reached for his hand, her fingers warm, even though her skin was dry and rough from work. "What happened, Elijah?" He looked at her, and the control he held so tightly slipped. "Just a fraction. They treated me like I was dirty, Anya, like I didn't belong." Enya's eyes filled, not with weakness, but with a fierce, burning pain. She squeezed his hand. "Elijah, you've been there for years. You built that place with your sweat." "I know," Anya swallowed, trying to steady her voice. "How will we pay?" Elijah cut her off quickly. "I'll find something. I can work anywhere. I can do night shifts. I can." Anya shook her head. "Stop, sit." Elijah sat. Anya remained standing. as if she needed the height to maintain her strength. "Did you call them?" Elijah blinked. "Call who?" Enya's voice lowered. "Marcus, Maya." Elijah's jaw tightened. "No." Anya stared at him. "Elijah." He looked away. "They have their lives." Anya leaned forward, her voice a quiet force. "They are our lives." Elijah's voice went quiet. "They don't need to know every problem." Enya's hands curled at her sides. She was not a loud woman, but when she spoke now, there was something steady, something unyielding and profound. "You keep things from them because you think you're protecting them. But sometimes, Elijah, you're just protecting your pride." Elijah flinched. Anya softened again, her voice a bomb. "I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm just tired of watching you carry everything alone." Elijah stared at the table. Then his phone buzzed. He looked at it. Marcus calling. Anya saw the screen and held her breath. Elijah answered. "Marcus." Marcus's voice came fast, urgent. "Dad, are you home?" "Yes." "Is Mom there?" Anya stepped closer. Elijah put the phone on speaker. "I'm here, son," Anya said. There was a pause, then Marcus said, "Okay, listen carefully. Don't go anywhere tonight." Elijah frowned. What are you talking about?" Marcus's tone lowered, strained. "Just don't." Enya's eyes widened. "Marcus, what is happening?" Marcus hesitated, like he was choosing words for someone fragile. "Something that shouldn't have happened, and we need to stand together." Elias's breath hitched. Marcus's voice, firm yet controlled, cut through the static. "Dad, did anyone from Ethel Corp threaten you? Did they lay a hand on you?" Elias swallowed hard. "No." "Did they force you to sign anything?" Marcus pressed. Elias blinked. "Termination papers." A heavy silence. Then Marcus, his voice a low rumble. "Okay." It was a single word. But it wasn't acceptance. It was a verdict. Lena's whisper, laced with dread. "Marcus, please. Don't do anything reckless." Marcus's voice softened, but his resolve hardened. "I won't. But I won't let this injustice stand." Elias's face tightened. "Marcus, stop. This is my burden." Marcus's reply was immediate, unwavering. "No, Dad, this was never just your burden." Elias's stomach clenched. "Where are you?" Marcus didn't answer directly. "Maya is with me." Lena's hand flew to her mouth, a silent gasp. "Both of you?" "Yes," Marcus affirmed. "Mom, I'm sorry, but this can't stay buried." Elias felt his heart pound, a frantic drum. "Marcus, I told you. Privacy." Marcus paused. When he spoke again, his voice was gentle, yet unmovable as bedrock. "Dad, you taught us dignity. You taught us to be calm. But you also taught us one thing you never say out loud." Elias's voice was a rough whisper. "What?" Marcus said. "That we don't leave family to fall." Elias closed his eyes, the silence deafening. Lena reached for his trembling shoulder, grounding him. Then Marcus added, his voice a promise, "Tomorrow morning, don't go looking for work yet. Just wait." Elias opened his eyes, a flicker of hope, then confusion. "Why?" Marcus didn't answer fully. He only said, "Because they're going to see you differently, whether they want to or not." The call ended. Elias sat motionless, staring at the silent phone, as if it held a dangerous secret. Lena whispered, "What does he mean?" Elias didn't respond immediately. Deep down, he knew, not the intricate details, not the full scope of the plan, but the undeniable feeling that his children were not as distant as he had pretended, that the quiet space he'd maintained wasn't because they didn't care, but because he was terrified of what the world would do if it knew who truly stood behind him. That night, Elias barely slept. He lay beside Lena, her breathing soft and rhythmic, his mind a relentless loop. The sterile lobby, the damning folder, the dismissive smirk. Then, the black sedan he'd glimpsed turning the corner. A chilling realization made his stomach twist. He hadn't imagined it. Somewhere, beyond the quiet of his home, something vast and deliberate was already in motion, and it was coming. The morning after Elias Vance was dismissed, the Ethel Corp Tower stood unchanged. Glass facades gleamed, polished floors shone. The corporate flag fluttered indifferently in the breeze. Inside, his name was an unuttered ghost. At 8 a.m., Chloe arrived. Coffee in one hand, phone in the other, She swiped her badge, settling at her reception desk. The lobby carried the faint, sterile scent of lemon cleaner, a lingering trace of the night crew. Her gaze drifted, unbidden, towards the service hallway. The facilities cart wasn't there. For a split second, a prickle of unease. Then her phone buzzed, and the feeling vanished. Upstairs, in the executive conference room, CEO Sterling Thorne stood by the panoramic window, buttoning his bespoke jacket. "Investor meeting at 9, he announced. "I want everything seamless." Director Evelyn Reed, poised at the table, tapped her tablet. "Security has been briefed, and the facilities matter is closed." Sterling Thorne nodded curtly. "Good." VP Damien Croft, in his impeccably tailored gray suit, leaned back, hands clasped behind his head. About time. That old timer was always underfoot. Evelyn Reed glanced up. "We followed protocol." Damien Croft smirked. "Protocol or not, it sends a message." Sterling Thorne turned. "Message." Damien shrugged. "That Ethel Corp has standards. We're not a charity." Evelyn hesitated. "He did work here a long time." Damien waved a dismissive hand. "So what? People are replaced. That's the market." He stood, straightening his cuffs. "Besides, individuals like him, they don't have options. He'll just fade into some other low-wage role by next week." Sterling Thorne smiled thinly. "Exactly. No harm done." None of them noticed the profound silence that followed, because silence was Elias Vance's language, and they mistook his quiet dignity for insignificance. On the ground floor, Mr. Henderson, the head of facilities, argued heatedly with a vendor on the phone. "You said 8 sharp. It's 8:40. He snapped. "Do you know who I answer to?" He paced near Officer Miller at the security desk. "No. I don't care about traffic." "Fix it." He slammed the phone down, muttering, "Unbelievable." Officer Miller leaned over. "You okay, Mr. Henderson?" The supervisor scoffed. "They fired Elias yesterday. Now nothing's where it should be. Floors aren't dry. Trash schedules are off. Everything's a mess." Officer Miller shrugged. "That's what happens." Mr. Henderson shook his head. 6 years. And they cut him loose like that. Cold. "Not our problem," Officer Miller replied, turning back to his screen. By mid-morning, the executives began to gather in the lobby. Men in dark suits, women in tailored jackets. Laughter, confident handshakes. The Ethel Corp Tower hummed with renewed importance. Damien Croft stood near the main entrance, a practiced smile for a potential investor. "We pride ourselves on discretion," he purred. "A clean operation. No noise." The investor nodded, impressed. Damien glanced around the gleaming lobby, satisfied. That's when Chloe noticed something strange. She leaned forward in her chair, squinting towards the street. A sleek, black SUV slowed near the curb. Then another appeared behind it. A third, a fourth. They didn't honk. They didn't rush. They moved with a quiet, almost surgical precision, as if trained to arrive without fanfare. Chloe's practiced smile faded. She slowly stood up. CEO Thorne." A whisper cut through the sterile air. She called. He turned. Outside, a fleet of dark vehicles materialized. The first, a sleek, obsidian SUV, parked with surgical precision directly before the building's grand entrance. 2 more aligned behind it, like silent sentinels. A fourth stopped across the street, its engine a low, controlled growl, a predatory hum that vibrated through the very ground. The opulent lobby fell into an unnatural hush. A few nervous investors turned towards the glass doors. "Are those security?" someone whispered, a tremor in their voice. Victor Thorne, senior operations, frowned, a cold dread creeping in. "They're not ours. Not our kind." 2 men emerged from the lead SUV, their dark suits tailored with an understated menace, earpieces barely visible. Their posture was a study in controlled power, alert, yet unnervingly calm. One of the building's own security guards straightened, a flicker of defiance in his eyes. Who authorized this? No one dared to answer. The men moved with purpose towards the entrance. The revolving door seemed to slow, almost deferring, as they entered. The very air in the Citadel lobby grew heavy, a palpable chill descending. Carly, a young assistant, swallowed hard, her hand instinctively reaching for her phone. Should I call someone, Mr. Sterling, a mid-level executive, stepped forward, attempting a facade of confidence. Excuse me, gentlemen, can I assist you? One of the men met his gaze, his eyes like chips of ice. We are here to see Elijah Vance. The name landed like a dropped gavel, echoing in the sudden silence. Victor Thorne let out a short, derisive laugh. Who? The man didn't flinch. Elijah Vance. Mr. Sterling blinked, his composure crumbling. He no longer works here. He was relieved of his duties yesterday. The man gave a slight, knowing nod. We know. The single word hung heavy. Victor Thorne stepped closer, his voice laced with false authority. Look, this is a private building. If you're here about, the second man spoke, his voice calm, firm, cutting through Victor's bluster. You should call him. Mr. Sterling's mouth went dry. Call him, yes, the man reiterated, his tone leaving no room for argument. Now, Victor Thorne scoffed, a desperate attempt to regain control. This is ridiculous. He spun towards his own security detail. Remove them. The guards hesitated, their eyes darting between Victor and the uninvited men. They had served long enough to recognize true authority, even when it walked in quietly. One guard cleared his throat, a nervous cough. Sir, perhaps we should. Victor snapped, his voice cracking. Do your job. But before the guards could move, the door of the fourth SUV outside opened. A woman stepped out. She didn't rush. She adjusted her tailored coat, a subtle gesture of power, then glanced at the citadel with an expression that held both disdain and fierce resolve. She walked towards the entrance, and her presence alone shifted the very fabric of the air. Carly felt it, a primal tremor, though she couldn't articulate why. The woman entered the lobby. She was in her early 30s, her dark hair pulled back in a severe, elegant style. No jewelry, save for a watch that exuded quiet luxury. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, scanned the room with unnerving calm. Then she spoke, her voice a low, resonant hum that commanded attention. Where's my father? The words were quiet, yet they pierced the silence, heard by every soul present. Mr. Sterling's heart hammered against his ribs. Your father. The woman's gaze, cold and unwavering, fixed on him. Elijah Vance. Victor Thorne laughed again, louder this time, a brittle, desperate sound. You've got to be kidding. The woman looked at Victor Thorne. Her expression was that of someone observing a particularly unpleasant stain. She had no time to clean. I am Amara Vance, she stated, her voice like steel. And I do not repeat myself. The investors shifted uncomfortably, their whispers dying. Carly's hand trembled as she clutched her phone. Mr. Sterling swallowed hard, trying to find his voice. Miss Vance, if this is about your father's employment. Amara raised one hand, a silent, imperious gesture. The men behind her subtly shifted, not threateningly, but with a protective readiness. My father, Amara continued, her voice gaining a chilling edge, was escorted out of this building yesterday. In front of everyone. Like a criminal, Victor Thorne crossed his arms, a defensive posture. He was terminated legally. Amara's eyes remained locked on him, unwavering. And you are? Victor hesitated, a flicker of unease crossing his face. Victor Thorne, Senior Operations. Amara nodded once, a single, decisive movement. Good, that single word, delivered with such quiet finality, made Victor Thorne profoundly uncomfortable, though he couldn't pinpoint why. Ms. Albright, a stern-faced executive, stepped forward, her voice tight with forced diplomacy. Miss Vance, we can discuss this privately. Amara smiled, a chilling, humorless curve of her lips. Private? She echoed. You made it public when you humiliated him. The lobby was now utterly silent, the air thick with anticipation. Even the elevator seemed to hold its breath, its soft ding conspicuously absent. One of the investors leaned towards another, whispering, Who are these people? The answer wasn't yet clear, but it was drawing closer, inexorably. Amara turned slightly, raising her phone to her ear, and spoke into it. He's not here. A man's voice, calm and deep, replied through the speaker. I know. Victor Thorne felt a sudden, icy chill prickle his skin. Amara added, her gaze sweeping over the stunned faces in the lobby. We're ready. She ended the call, Mr. Sterling forced a weak, desperate smile. Miss Vance, please, let's talk upstairs. Amara shook her head, a decisive, absolute no. She turned back to the grand glass doors. Bring him. The words were not loud, but they resonated with an undeniable power. Outside, engines shifted, doors opened, and for the first time that morning, the powerful figures who had so casually dismissed Elijah Vance felt something they had never associated with him before: raw, unadulterated fear. Elijah, unaware of the storm brewing in the Citadel, sat at his small kitchen table, his hands wrapped around a mug of tea that had long gone cold. The apartment was quiet, save for the rhythmic, almost mournful ticking of the cheap wall clock. Lena had left early for work, squeezing his shoulder before she went. Whatever happens, she had whispered, her voice thick with emotion, remember who you are, my love. Elijah had nodded, though he had no idea what was about to unfold. He had spent the morning doing what he always did when life dealt a cruel blow: cleaning. He wiped down the already spotless counters, straightened chairs that were perfectly aligned, folded laundry that was already folded. Keeping his hands busy helped to quiet the storm in his mind. His phone lay on the table, its screen dark. He hadn't called Marcus back. He didn't want to, because calling meant questions, and questions meant answers. And answers meant dragging his children into a mess he believed belonged only to him. That belief was a heavy burden, but it was a familiar one. At 10 a.m. his phone buzzed. A message from Marcus. Please stay home, don't leave. Trust me. Elijah stared at the words, then slowly typed back, I'm fine, don't cause trouble. 3 dots appeared almost immediately, then vanished, then reappeared. Dad, silence isn't the same as dignity. Elijah closed his eyes, a deep sigh escaping him. He didn't reply. Back at the Citadel, the tension was a suffocating blanket. Mr. Sterling's forced smile had vanished, replaced by a mask of stark terror. Ms. Albright stood stiffly near the conference room doors, her face pale. Mr. Sterling, CEO of Sterling Global, stalked the panoramic windows, his phone a nervous tick in his hand. Who do they think they are? He seethed, his voice a low growl. Anya stood at the heart of the opulent lobby, a still point in a storm, her hands clasped, her gaze unwavering. The 2 formidable men flanking her were statues, the corporate guards equally frozen. A hushed murmur rippled through the employees by the elevators. An investor cleared his throat. Perhaps we should reschedule. No one dared answer. Sterling finally snapped. Miss Anya, your father was a janitor. Nothing more. You're blowing this out of proportion. Anya turned to him, her movements slow, deliberate. You don't know my father. Sterling scoffed, a sound of pure disdain. I know enough. He scrubbed floors. Anya nodded, her voice a steel whisper that cut through the silence. Yes, he did. He scrubbed floors so my brother and I wouldn't have to. The words landed with the force of a physical blow. Ms. Davies, Sterling's PR manager, stepped in quickly. We are willing to review the termination. Mistakes happen. Anya's eyes, dark and piercing, met hers. Was it a mistake when security dragged him out? Ms. Davies hesitated. That was procedure. Anya's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. Procedure says a lot about people. Sterling rolled his eyes. This is pointless. He sneered, even if he was mistreated. What exactly do you think you can do? Anya met his gaze fully, her resolve hardening. We're not here to do anything, she stated, her voice resonating with quiet power. We're here because you already did. Sterling opened his mouth to retort. A guard's radio crackled, a hushed voice reporting, vehicle approaching. All eyes snapped to the glass facade. Another sleek, black SUV glided into view. But this one didn't stop at the curb. It pulled directly into the private executive parking space, a hallowed ground reserved for Sterling Global's absolute elite. Sterling's face flushed crimson. That's restricted. Anya showed no surprise. The SUV door opened. A man emerged, tall, broad-shouldered, in a dark, impeccably tailored coat, his expression utterly calm. He adjusted his cuff once, a gesture of quiet authority. Then, with measured, unhurried steps, he walked towards the entrance. As he entered the lobby, even Anya straightened slightly, a flicker of acknowledgement. Kai Park, she murmured. Sterling frowned. Who? Kai surveyed the lobby slowly, taking in every detail, the polished marble, the averted eyes, the suffocating tension. Then, his voice, deep and resonant, broke the silence. My father cleaned this place, Kai said, his gaze locking onto Sterling. And you treated him like trash. Sterling let out a nervous, hollow laugh. You can't just... Kai raised a hand. Sterling's words died in his throat, not from force, but from the sheer, undeniable weight of Kai's presence. Kai turned to Anya. Is he here? Anya shook her head. No. Kai exhaled slowly. Good. Mr. Thorne, Sterling's second-in-command, cleared his throat nervously. Mr. Park, we can resolve this quietly. Kai looked at him, a chilling glint in his eyes. Quiet, Kai stated, is what lets you think you could do this. The vast lobby suddenly felt impossibly small. Sterling crossed his arms, a desperate attempt to reclaim control. Look, whatever your family thinks it is, this is a workplace issue. Your father chose not to defend himself. The words were a calculated jab. Anya stiffened, her breath catching. Kai's eyes darkened, a storm brewing beneath the calm. He didn't choose weakness, Kai said, his voice dangerously even. He chose restraint. Sterling scoffed, same thing. Kai stepped closer, and for the first time, Sterling instinctively recoiled. My father didn't explain himself. Kai continued, his voice dropping to a low, powerful register. Because he didn't want to embarrass you. A stunned silence. What? Ms. Davies whispered. Kai looked at her, his gaze piercing. He told us never to use our position to intimidate people. He told us dignity is quiet. Sterling laughed again, but it was a broken, hollow sound now. Position? What position? Kai didn't answer. He turned slightly, speaking into his phone, his voice a quiet command. Begin outside, engines cut. In perfect, chilling synchronicity, more doors opened, more people stepped out. Not aggressive, but professional, focused, an army of quiet intent. Employees pressed themselves against the walls. Investors whispered urgently, their faces pale. Mr. Thorne's hands trembled visibly. What is this? Sterling stammered. Kai looked back at him, his eyes like cold steel. This is me noticing what you did to my father. He turned to Anya. Call him. Anya hesitated, her hand hovering over her phone. Now, Kai nodded. Yes, he deserves to hear it from us, not from rumors. Anya pulled out her phone. Miles away, in his small apartment, Elias's phone rang. He stared at the screen, Anya calling. His heart began to pound a frantic rhythm. He answered, his voice raspy. Anya. Her voice came, gentle yet firm. Dad, where are you? At home. Elias said quickly, a knot forming in his stomach. What's wrong? Anya paused. Then, she said carefully, nothing is wrong. Something is being fixed. Elias's chest tightened, a familiar fear gripping him. Anya, please don't do this. Do what? She asked softly. Turn this into a fight. Elias pleaded. I don't want trouble. Anya's voice cracked, just a fraction, revealing a lifetime of suppressed pain. Dad, you already had trouble. You just carried it alone. Elias stood up, his hand pressing against the worn kitchen table. You shouldn't be involved. Anya took a deep, steadying breath. We're already involved. Because we're your family. Elias pressed his free hand to the table, his voice a desperate whisper. Please, I don't want revenge. Kai's voice joined the call. Calm but serious, resonating with quiet power. This isn't revenge. Elias's heart sank. Then what is it? Kai answered without a trace of anger. It's accountability. Elias closed his eyes, a single tear tracing a path down his weathered cheek. On the other end of the call, Anya looked across the lobby at the faces of the people who had dismissed her father. Then she spoke the words that made Elias's knees weaken. Dad, we're at your building. Elias whispered. What? Kai added, his voice a steady anchor. They need to see you, not the uniform you. Elias's voice shook. No, Anya said quietly, Dad. They already decided who you were without asking. Now, they have to face you. Elias leaned against the wall. Breathing hard, he wanted to disappear, to vanish. But beneath the terror, something else stirred. Not pride, not anger, but a profound, terrifying sense of inevitability. A wave of quiet resolve washed over Elias. Outside, the vanguard of their movement, Marcus, checked his watch, a silent signal passing between them. Inside, Director Hayes, his face pale, whispered, "This is escalating beyond control." Marcus met his gaze, unflinching. "No, Director. This is the moment you realized you never had it." Miles away, in the quiet solitude of his small apartment, Elias Vance opened his eyes. He looked at the worn door, the familiar, humble room, at the life he had meticulously kept small, contained. "Lena," he said, his voice a steady, tired rumble, "I don't want anyone harmed." Lena, though he couldn't see it, smiled. "They won't be, Dad." Marcus's voice, firm and clear, echoed in the earpiece. "You taught us better than that, Elias." Elias swallowed, a lifetime of quiet endurance in that simple act. "Then I'll come." Outside the gleaming tower, a fleet of black SUVs waited, engines a silent hum, doors poised. The calm before the storm of truth. Elias took the city bus, not out of necessity, but out of habit. It was his ritual, his quiet defiance of the world's expectations. He sat near the back, the small, worn box from yesterday resting on his lap, knees pressed together, shoulders slightly rounded, a man trying to disappear. No one on the bus knew the weight he carried, the seismic shift he was about to unleash. No one cared. And for Elias, that anonymity had always been a familiar, fragile shield. Outside the grimy window, the city pulsed with its usual rhythm, shops opening, people rushing, life continuing its oblivious dance. As if the very foundations of power weren't about to be shaken, Elias watched it all, a quiet observer. His phone buzzed again. "Marcus, we see you, don't rush." Elias didn't reply. He slipped the phone back into his pocket, his focus narrowing to the slow, steady rhythm of his own breath. He wasn't afraid of the imposing glass and steel of Olympus Tower. He was afraid of what would happen to the people inside it, the ones who had forgotten what it meant to be human. Because Elias Vance had never sought power. He had only ever yearned for peace, for dignity. Back at the Olympus Group headquarters, the atmosphere had curdled from confusion to a palpable unease. The high-stakes investor meeting had been quietly, inexplicably postponed. Assistants whispered frantically into phones, their faces etched with worry. Security guards stood ramrod straight, their eyes scanning every shadow. The usual corporate laughter had died. Sterling Thorne, CEO, paced near the polished elevators, his jaw clenched. "This is utterly absurd. We're letting them intimidate us." Director Hayes wiped a bead of sweat from his forehead. "Sterling, please lower your voice." "I will not," Sterling snapped, his voice echoing. "This is our building." Lena stood a few steps away, a quiet sentinel, calm, unmoving, as if time itself bent around her. "You keep saying that," she stated, her voice clear and steady. "It doesn't make it true." Sterling whirled, his face contorted. "What is that supposed to mean?" Lena didn't answer him. Her gaze drifted to her watch, a silent countdown. Across the opulent lobby, a security guard leaned conspiratorially toward his partner. "Who are these people?" The other shook his head, a flicker of unease in his eyes. "I don't know, but this isn't random." Ms. Albright, the company's sharp-suited legal counsel, approached Lena cautiously. "Ms. Vance, if there's something you desire, we can discuss terms." Lena looked at her, a faint, weary smile touching her lips. "Terms, yes." Ms. Albright continued. "Compensation, an apology, a private settlement." Lena's eyes hardened, not with anger, but with a profound, aching disappointment. "You still think this is about money?" she asked, the words cutting through the corporate veneer. Ms. Albright faltered, her practiced composure cracking. Sterling scoffed, a harsh, dismissive sound. "Then what is it about?" Lena turned, her gaze locking onto his, unwavering. "It's about respect. The respect you refuse to give, even when it cost you absolutely nothing." The words hung heavy in the air, a truth that resonated. Sterling let out a single, sharp, bitter laugh. "Respect is earned," Sterling sneered. Marcus spoke from near the grand entrance, his voice cutting through the tension. "He earned it. Every morning, at 5 a.m., Sterling whirled. "By mopping floors, yes?" Marcus stepped forward, his gaze steady. by showing up, by staying quiet when people were cruel, by choosing dignity, even when it would have been easier to fight. Sterling shook his head, a dismissive wave of his hand. You're romanticizing a janitor. Marcus took another step, his voice dropping, but gaining immense power. You dehumanized a father. The truth landed like a hammer blow. A stunned silence fell over the opulent lobby. Outside, the black SUVs remained perfectly still, a silent, unmoving vigil. Pedestrians slowed, their curiosity a tangible force, pulling their eyes toward the gleaming, besieged tower. A woman across the street stopped, her phone raised. Then, as if sensing the gravity of the moment, she lowered it and walked on. Something about the vehicles felt deliberate, controlled, like they were waiting for an unspoken signal. Inside, the tension tightened, a suffocating coil. Director Hayes cleared his throat, his voice barely a whisper. "Where is Elias?" Lena answered, her eyes still fixed on the entrance. On his way. Sterling's stomach plummeted. "He's actually coming," he muttered, disbelief warring with dawning dread. "Yes," Marcus affirmed, "and you're going to look at him when he does." Sterling scoffed again, but his hands, betraying him, trembled slightly. Ms. Albright whispered, her voice laced with dread, "This is a mistake." Lena turned to her, her gaze piercing. "No, yesterday was the mistake." 2 blocks away, Elias Vance stepped off the bus, his feet touching the pavement with a quiet resolve. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment, adjusting the lapels of his jacket. It wasn't new. It wasn't expensive, but it was impeccably clean, a testament to his unwavering dignity. He caught his reflection in a shop window, not a uniform, just a man about to reclaim his story. His phone buzzed again. "Lena, we're here. Take your time." Elias exhaled slowly, a lifetime of quiet battles in that single breath. He began to walk, each step feeling heavier than the last, not from fear, but from the immense weight of the moment. Not because he was afraid of being seen, but because he had spent his entire life trying not to be. Inside the tower, Sterling Thorne checked his watch again, his impatience a raw nerve. "Enough," he snapped, his voice cracking. "This ends now. Director Hayes, call the police." Director Hayes hesitated, his gaze darting between Sterling and the silent, watchful crowd. "On what grounds, Sterling?" Sterling opened his mouth to retort, then froze. Because at that precise moment, the grand revolving doors began to slow, their polished glass reflecting the stunned faces within. Every head turned, the doors parted, and Elias Vance stepped inside. No fanfare, no dramatic announcement, just a quiet man, carrying a small, unassuming box. The opulent lobby felt like it collectively stopped breathing. Sarah, behind the reception desk, stared, her mouth slightly agape. "That's him," she whispered. The lead security guard stiffened, his hand instinctively going to his sidearm. Ms. Albright's face drained of all color. Sterling blinked, confusion warring with dawning dread. "That's him." Elias walked forward, slowly, deliberately. His eyes scanned the vast lobby, not with anger, but with a profound, almost intimate recognition. He had cleaned these polished floors 1,000 times. He knew every hidden corner, every forgotten stain. Lena moved first, a blur of determined grace. She crossed the lobby swiftly, stopping directly in front of him. "Dad," she said, her voice a soft, fierce whisper. Elias's shoulders, burdened for so long, dropped a fraction. "Lena," she took the small box from his hands, a silent, powerful gesture of shared burden. "You don't need to carry that anymore." Elias looked momentarily embarrassed, a lifetime of self-reliance ingrained. "It's fine." Marcus stepped up beside them, a silent pillar of solidarity. It wasn't just the three of them. Elias Vance stood tall, flanked by his children, Julian and Anya. The air crackled. Sterling Thorne stared, his face a mask of disbelief. "This is preposterous," he stammered, his voice thin. "All this for him?" Julian turned, his gaze unwavering. "Yes," Julian affirmed, his voice a low rumble. "All this for him." Outside, a deep, resonant hum began. Not a roar, but a symphony of power, engines settling into perfect unison. The sound vibrated through the polished glass, a silent, undeniable warning that resonated deep in every chest. Anya looked at Elias, her eyes soft. "Are you all right, Father?" Elias nodded slowly, a quiet strength returning to his gaze. "I am now." Sterling took a step back. For the first time, a cold dread seeped into his bones. This wasn't an ending. This was just the prologue. The truth arrived first as a sound, then as a presence. Not aggressive, not loud, but the deep, steady thrum of engines, perfectly aligned. For obsidian black SUVs, sleek and imposing, glided into view through the towering glass walls of the Omnicorp atrium. They parked with an undeniable authority, as if the very street belonged to them, summoned by a power far beyond any corporate decree. The grand revolving door stilled. No one spoke. Elias stood between his children, his hands now empty, his shoulders still slightly rounded from years of quiet labor. He felt every eye in the cavernous room upon him, but he didn't lift his chin in defiance. He didn't straighten to impress. That was never his way. His dignity was an internal flame, unextinguished by external judgment. Julian stepped half a pace forward, a silent guardian. "Before this proceeds any further," he stated calmly, his voice echoing with quiet command, "I want something unequivocally clear." Sterling swallowed hard, his throat dry. "What? This isn't a negotiation." Julian's eyes hardened. "And it's not a threat," Anya added, her voice a whip crack of precision. "It's a correction, Director Thorne." Director Thorne attempted a dismissive laugh, but it caught in his throat. "You're acting like we committed a crime." Julian met his gaze, unflinching. "You did." Silence descended, heavier and more absolute than any shout. Ms. Albright whispered, "We followed company policy." Anya turned to her, her voice laced with steel. "Policy does not erase humiliation. It does not absolve cruelty." Sterling scoffed again, but panic now flickered in his eyes. "You still haven't explained who you think you are." Julian nodded once, a gesture of cold agreement. "Fair enough." He reached into his tailored coat and removed a slim, leather-bound folder. He didn't throw it. He placed it with deliberate, almost gentle precision on the gleaming reception desk, directly in front of Maya. "Please open it," he instructed. Maya's hand trembled as she complied. Her eyes widened, then widened further, a gasp catching in her throat. She looked up, her face ashen. This can't be right." Director Thorne stepped forward, his voice tight. "What is it, Maya?" Maya swallowed, her voice barely a whisper. "Corporate registry filings, board affiliations, security clearances." Sterling snapped. "Clearances for what?" Maya didn't answer him. Her gaze was fixed on Elias, as if seeing him for the very first time, stripped of all prior assumptions. Julian spoke again, his voice cutting through the tension. "My sister and I manage the Vance Family Trust." Sterling let out a sharp, derisive laugh. "A trust, that's it." Anya shook her head slowly. "Not that kind." She nodded subtly toward the window, outside. One of the men by the SUV lifted a phone, speaking quietly into it. Another adjusted his earpiece, his movements precise. A third stood perfectly still, scanning the street with the practiced, vigilant eyes of a professional. Director Thorne's voice dropped, a tremor of fear entering it. "Those aren't private drivers, are they?" Julian met his gaze. "No." The truth began to seep into the room, slow, uncomfortable, and utterly devastating. Sterling's arrogant confidence began to crack, visibly. "You're saying what? That your father is rich?" Julian shook his head. "No." Anya finished the sentence, her voice clear and resonant. "We are." Sterling scoffed weakly, a pathetic sound. "Then why was he working here?" Elias spoke for the first time since entering, his voice quiet, yet it commanded the room. "Because work matters," he said, his gaze steady, "and because I wanted to." The room didn't know how to process such a profound, simple truth. Julian continued, "Our family owns multiple logistics firms, extensive real estate holdings, and infrastructure contracts across 3 states. Ms. Albright's knees almost buckled. That's not possible." Anya tilted her head, a faint, knowing smile playing on her lips. "It's public information, Ms. Albright." Sterling's mouth opened, then closed. He turned slowly to Elias, his face contorted. You could have said something." Elias looked at him gently, his eyes holding a lifetime of quiet wisdom. "And you," he replied, "could have treated me like a person, without knowing. That was when something inside Sterling broke. His face flushed a furious red. This is absurd. You let him clean floors while you... Anya cut him off, her voice now sharp, a blade of ice. We let our father choose his life. We honored his dignity. She stepped closer, her eyes burning with righteous anger. You forced your judgment on him. You stripped him of his humanity based on a uniform. The grand doors of the atrium opened again. Another figure entered the lobby. An older man, distinguished gray hair. An expensive but understated coat. Every security guard in the room straightened instinctively. The man walked directly to Elias, his steps measured and deliberate. He bowed his head slightly, a gesture of profound respect. "Mr. Vance," he said, his voice calm and authoritative. "We're ready." Sterling's breath caught in his throat. Who is that?" Julian answered flatly. His gaze fixed on Sterling. "Our legal counsel." The words hit like a hammer. "Director." Thorne whispered, "Legal." The man turned to the executives, his expression unyielding. "I advise you to document everything said here today." Ms. Albright's hands trembled visibly. "Why?" "Because this termination," the man stated calmly, his voice resonating with legal authority, "violates multiple labor protections." Sterling stammered. He signed. The lawyer raised a single, commanding finger under coercion. In front of armed security, silence. The man continued, his gaze sweeping the room. "There are also witnesses." Maya's stomach dropped. The Omnicorp guards shifted uncomfortably, their faces betraying their unease. Anya looked round the lobby, her eyes taking in every face that had watched her father be escorted out, every eye that had judged. Sterling backed away, bumping into a chair, his composure shattered. "You're doing this on purpose." Julian shook his head slowly, a profound weariness in his eyes. "No." "Mr. Thorne, you did." Outside, the SUV's doors opened again. More people stepped out. Not aggressive, official, calm. Each one a silent, undeniable testament to the Vance family's reach. The gleaming Omnicorp Tower, once a symbol of unassailable power, suddenly felt very small, very exposed. Elias watched it all, like someone observing a storm from behind unbreakable glass. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He just felt a profound, quiet exhaustion and a deep, abiding sense of peace. Director Thorne's voice cracked, utterly broken. "What do you want?" Sterling's voice, laced with a final, desperate challenge. Elias met his gaze, unwavering. "I want my humanity back," he declared, "my dignity, my very soul." The words, simple yet profound, shattered the carefully constructed facade of power. Sterling collapsed into a chair, a puppet with severed strings. Ms. Albright covered her mouth. A silent gasp. Lena whispered, "Oh my God." Kai placed a hand, light as a feather, on his father's shoulder. "Dad," he said softly, "you've said enough." Elias nodded, a quiet strength radiating from him. Outside, the relentless hum of the corporate machine seemed to falter, not because it was broken, but because the raw, undeniable truth had arrived, leaving nowhere to hide. The grand atrium, once a monument to Sterling's power, now felt like a glass cage, exposed. Sterling sat in the chair as if it had betrayed him, offering no solace. His hands, usually steady, trembled. He wiped them on his bespoke suit, oblivious. The armor of his confidence, forged over decades, was cracking, revealing the man beneath. Mr. Thorne stood near the wall, staring at the polished floor, a silent witness to the unraveling. Ms. Albright's tablet lay forgotten on the desk. No one was taking notes now. They were bearing witness. The lawyer cleared his throat, a gentle but firm sound. "We will proceed carefully," he stated. Sterling looked up sharply. "Proceed with what?" The lawyer's reply was stark. "Consequences." Sterling's voice rose, a desperate plea. "This is ridiculous. We did nothing illegal." The lawyer didn't argue. He simply slid a document across the gleaming table. Sterling didn't touch it. Kai spoke, his voice calm but cutting. "You stripped a loyal man of his livelihood, his reputation. You paraded him out like a criminal." Sterling shook his head. He signed the papers. Elias finally turned toward him fully, his eyes holding a lifetime of quiet resilience. "I signed because I sought peace. Not because it was just, Elias said. His voice, steady as bedrock, struck deeper fear into Sterling than any scream. Ms. Albright stepped forward, her face etched with regret. Her eyes wet. Mr. Vance, I am so sorry. I should have stood up. Elias looked at her. You had the choice, he said quietly. She flinched. Mr. Thorne cleared his throat. We can offer reinstatement with a significant raise. A formal, public apology. Sterling nodded quickly, desperately. Yes, of course, whatever he wants. Elias shook his head slowly, a quiet, resolute refusal. I will not return, he said. The words were calm, final, echoing through the vast space. My fight is not for a job, but for justice. Sterling's face drained of color. You don't understand. This can be fixed. Elias looked around the grand atrium, a place that once held him captive. Some wounds cannot be healed by mere bandages. Zara stepped forward then, her voice controlled but sharp as tempered steel. You don't get to define what fixed means for us. Sterling stood abruptly, his voice cracking. You're destroying lives over pride. Kai met his eyes, unflinching. No, we're stopping you from destroying any more. Silence. The lawyer spoke again. His words like hammer blows, effective immediately. Double quotes. We will be filing a formal complaint with the labor board. Ms. Albright's shoulders sagged. The board, she whispered. Yes, the lawyer confirmed. And the city, Mr. Thorne whispered. The city. Kai nodded. Viridian Holdings operates on public trust, public contracts. Sterling's legs weakened. He sat back down hard. You can't. He started. Zara cut in, her voice cold. You should have considered that before yesterday's public execution. One of the security officers, Officer Miller, stepped forward, his voice shaking. I was ordered to escort him out. Elias turned to him, his gaze compassionate. You were doing what you believed was your duty. The officer swallowed hard. I'm sorry, Mr. Vance. Elias nodded once. I know, that moment. A flicker of shared humanity, pierced deeper than any insult. By afternoon, the building buzzed with a different, uneasy energy. The corporate machine, once so smooth, now sputtered. Emails flew like panicked birds. Calls were frantic. Meetings dissolved into chaos. Sterling's office door remained closed, a tomb. Mr. Thorne resigned before dusk. Ms. Albright sat alone in the conference room, staring at her reflection in the glass, a ghost in the machine. No triumphant cheers, no celebratory shouts. Justice, when it arrives quietly, often feels like a profound, unsettling calm. Elias stood near the grand entrance with his children. Lena approached slowly, her eyes red-rimmed. Mr. Vance, I'm so sorry. I should have spoken up. Elias smiled faintly, a gentle warmth in his eyes. It takes immense courage to speak when fear holds your tongue. She nodded, tears welling. I won't forget this. Elias hoped she wouldn't. Outside, the sleek SUV waited again. Zara touched her father's arm. Ready, Dad? Elias looked back at the grand atrium one last time. The place where he had been rendered invisible, now forced to truly see him. Yes, he said. They walked out together, not as a spectacle, but as a united front, a family reborn. People on the sidewalk paused, watching as the grand doors opened for Elias, not by force, but by the undeniable weight of his truth. He stepped into the sunlight, head held high, shoulders back. Kai held one open for him. Elias hesitated. I don't need. Kai smiled gently. Let us. Elias got in. As the doors closed, he saw Sterling through the tinted glass, standing alone, a small, isolated figure watching the world move on without him. For the first time, Elias understood a profound truth. Power doesn't change who you are. It merely reveals it. The SUVs pulled away smoothly, disappearing into the city's pulse. Inside the building, a new silence settled, heavier, more resonant, destined to linger. Elias didn't wake the next morning to opulence. He woke to sunlight filtering through simple, familiar curtains. The apartment was quiet. Amara was in the kitchen, making tea, the comforting aroma filling the air. She looked up when he entered, searching his face as if to confirm the seismic shift of yesterday. Are you truly okay? She asked. Elias nodded, a genuine smile gracing his lips. I slept. She smiled softly. That's a new kind of peace. They sat at the small table together. No rush, no gnawing fear pressing on Elias's chest. For the first time in years, the day felt open, full of possibility instead of threatening. Later that week, Elias didn't put on a uniform. He walked with Amara to the market, a free man, his dignity restored. Elias Vance, a man who once commanded rooms, now found profound purpose in the quiet rhythm of his hands. He mended a broken hinge, each turn of the screw a deliberate act of care. He chose vegetables with the same meticulous attention he once gave to global treaties. No one bowed, no one stared. This was his chosen sanctuary. Marcus and Lena, his truest allies, visited often. They didn't hover, didn't intrude. They understood. They didn't seek to reclaim his past or turn his peace into a spectacle of their own influence. They honored his quiet strength, just as they always had. Elias poured his formidable energy into the Haven Community Hub. Cleaning, repairing, mentoring, he worked not with fanfare, but with the silent dedication of a man rebuilding something far greater than just a broken chair. Not for a paycheck, but for the profound, undeniable hum of purpose. When a grateful voice offered thanks, he simply nodded, a faint smile touching his lips, and returned to his work. That was enough. One crisp afternoon, Elias found himself walking past the obsidian spire. He paused, a solitary figure across the bustling street. The glass still gleamed, a titan against the sky. The flag still whipped defiantly in the wind. But something had shifted. The tower felt smaller, its shadow less imposing. No one recognized him, and that, in itself, was a victory. He smiled, because true dignity doesn't demand an audience. It simply is. Now, let me ask you, how many times have you judged a soul by the uniform they wear? By the title they hold, or the silence they keep? By the worn fabric of their clothes? By the quiet humility with which they stand in the corner? How many times have you mistaken a profound, resilient silence for weakness? Elias Vance never needed power to be strong. He didn't need wealth to possess immeasurable value. He didn't need to explain his worth to deserve respect. His dignity was inherent, unyielding. The world only learned the truth when the motorcade arrived, when the headlines screamed his name. But the truth of Elias Vance, the truth of his profound, quiet strength, had been there all along. Dignity doesn't announce itself with trumpets. It waits, it endures, and when it's ignored, dismissed, or trampled for too long, it rises, quietly, unmistakably, and utterly, gloriously impossible to deny. If Elias's journey made you pause, even for a heartbeat, carry that feeling with you. Treat every soul with kindness, with respect, before you know their story. Not after the world demands you see their worth. If you believe in the quiet, unyielding power of resilience, tap that like button. If you believe respect should never be a privilege of status, but a fundamental right, then subscribe. And if you've ever witnessed someone judged too quickly, too harshly, share this story. Because somewhere out there, someone needs to hear that their inherent worth is non-negotiable.